Adrian performed perfectly during practice. When he prepared alone, everything worked. His thoughts were clear, his explanations were sharp, every idea made sense. But the moment pressure appeared, something changed. His mind scattered. During presentations, his voice tightened. During meetings, he struggled to explain ideas he had understood perfectly just hours earlier. And the strangest part was this: Adrian didn't lack skill. He only collapsed when people were watching. You can see the same pattern everywhere. An athlete dominates during training, but misses the final shot in a championship game. A student studies for weeks, but forgets everything the moment the exam begins. A talented employee knows exactly what to say in a meeting, but freezes when everyone turns toward them. Afterward, the same question always appears. What happened? The preparation was there. The ability was there. But when pressure arrived, the performance disappeared. Most people explain this in simple ways. They blame confidence. They say some people simply can't handle pressure, but that explanation misses something important. Pressure does not destroy skill. Pressure reveals the condition of the mind. When pressure rises, the mind either becomes sharper or it begins to collapse. Thoughts race. Attention drifts. Fear imagines failure before action even begins. And suddenly the mind that once felt clear becomes your greatest obstacle. Centuries ago, the samurai faced situations far more intense than a meeting, an interview, or a competition. Battlefields were chaotic. Decisions had to be made instantly. One moment of panic could cost a warrior his life. So samurai developed a mental discipline designed specifically for those moments. A philosophy known as Zanshin. Zanshin can be translated as the remaining mind. It describes a state where the mind stays calm, present, and aware, even when everything around it becomes chaotic. A mind that does not scatter under pressure. A mind that continues observing, thinking, and acting with clarity. Today we're going to explore how this ancient discipline works, because once you understand it, something surprising becomes clear. Pressure is not the enemy. An untrained mind is. And to understand why, we need to look at the story of a man who struggled with pressure his entire life. A man who could perform perfectly during preparation, but collapsed whenever the moment truly mattered. For years he believed the problem was confidence, but eventually he discovered something far more uncomfortable. The real problem was the mind he had trained, and the moment he began training it differently, everything changed. Adrian had always been good when no one was watching. When he practiced alone, everything worked perfectly. His thoughts were organized, his explanations were clear, the ideas in his mind connected smoothly. If someone had seen him during those quiet moments of preparation, they would have assumed he was confident. But something strange happened the moment pressure appeared. During meetings at work, Adrian often knew the answer before anyone else in the room. He understood the projects. He could see problems early. Sometimes he even prepared what he wanted to say before the conversation reached that point. But when the moment arrived, when people turned toward him, his mind suddenly changed. The clarity disappeared. His thoughts became scattered. The sentence he had just rehearsed in his head felt difficult to explain, so Adrian hesitated. A few seconds passed. Someone else spoke, and the opportunity disappeared. At first he convinced himself it was simply caution. Maybe he just needed more time to think. Maybe speaking too quickly would make him look careless. But the pattern kept repeating. Weeks turned into months. A colleague who joined the company after him was promoted to lead a project. Another co-worker began presenting ideas confidently during meetings. Meanwhile, Adrian stayed exactly where he had always been, not because he lacked ability, but because every time pressure appeared, his mind froze. The problem wasn't limited to work. Adrian had recently signed up for a local martial arts class, hoping the training would help him build more confidence. During practice drills, he performed extremely well. His movements were precise. His reactions were quick. The instructor even complimented his natural coordination. But when sparring sessions began, when another student stood across from him and the pressure of competition appeared, everything changed. Adrian hesitated. His movements slowed. The techniques he had performed smoothly during practice suddenly felt clumsy. His opponent moved faster, reacted sooner, and controlled the match. After class, Adrian often sat quietly on the edge of the training floor, frustrated. He couldn't understand it. How could someone perform so well during practice but collapse when the moment became real? One evening, after another disappointing sparring session, the instructor approached him. The instructor's name was Takeda. Takeda had been watching Adrian carefully for weeks. "You are not weak," Takeda said calmly. Adrian looked surprised. "Then why does this keep happening?" he asked. Takeda studied him for a moment before answering. "Because your mind leaves the moment when pressure arrives." Adrian frowned. "What does that mean?" Takeda gestured toward the training floor where the other students were finishing their drills. "During practice, your mind is calm," he said. "But when pressure appears, your attention begins chasing fear. Your thoughts jump forward, imagining failure before the action even begins." He paused. "And when the mind abandons the present moment, performance collapses." Adrian sat silently, thinking about those words. For the first time, he began to suspect something uncomfortable. Maybe pressure wasn't the real problem. Maybe the real problem was the way his mind reacted when pressure appeared. And if that was true, then the solution was not confidence. It was training the mind to remain steady when everything else tried to pull it away. After that conversation, Adrian couldn't stop thinking about what Takeda had said. Your mind leaves the moment when pressure arrives. At first, the idea sounded strange. Adrian had always believed the problem was confidence, that if he practiced more, prepared better, or believed in himself more strongly, the pressure would eventually stop affecting him. But Takeda's words suggested something different. The problem was not confidence. The problem was attention. A few days later, Adrian stayed after training and approached Takeda again. "I've been thinking about what you said," he admitted. "About my mind leaving the moment." Takeda nodded slightly, as if he had expected the question. "In traditional martial arts," he began, "there is a principle called Zanshin." Adrian had never heard the word before. Takeda wrote the characters slowly on a small notebook. "Zanshin means the remaining mind," he explained. "It describes a state where the mind remains present, aware and calm, even after an action is completed." Adrian listened carefully. Takeda continued. "In battle, a samurai could not afford to let his attention collapse after striking an opponent. A warrior who relaxed too soon, or whose mind wandered even for a moment, could be defeated immediately. So samurai trained their awareness differently. Even after making a movement, a strike, a step, a decision, the mind remained steady. Present, alert, ready. That state of awareness was Zanshin." Takeda looked directly at Adrian. "Most people believe pressure causes failure," he said, "but pressure only reveals what the mind is already doing." Adrian thought about his own experiences. During practice, his mind was calm, but the moment pressure appeared, something else happened. His thoughts jumped ahead. What if I fail? What if I look foolish? What if I make a mistake? Instead of focusing on the present moment, his mind began imagining future problems. Takeda seemed to read his thoughts. "When the mind begins chasing fear," he said, "it abandons the present moment, and when attention leaves the moment, performance collapses." Adrian felt something click in his mind. For years he had believed pressure destroyed his ability. But maybe that wasn't true. Maybe pressure simply revealed how unstable his attention really was. Takeda stood and gestured toward the empty training floor. "Zanshin is the discipline of remaining here," he said calmly, "right here, in the present moment. No matter how loud the pressure becomes." Adrian looked at the floor, imagining the countless moments in his life where his mind had raced ahead of the situation, moments where fear had pulled his attention away from what he was doing. For the first time, he began to understand. If the samurai had trained their minds to remain steady in the chaos of battle, then perhaps the mind could be trained to remain steady anywhere, even under pressure. Adrian expected the training to be intense. He imagined difficult physical exercises, complex techniques, maybe even long philosophical lectures. Instead, Takeda began with something much simpler. "Your problem is not your body," Takeda said during their next session. "Your problem is where your mind goes when pressure appears." Adrian stood on the training floor while the other students practiced quietly around them. "So how do I fix that?" Adrian asked. Takeda shook his head slightly. "You don't fix it," he replied. "You train it." The first exercise seemed almost too simple. Takeda asked Adrian to stand in the center of the room and perform a basic martial arts movement of forward step and strike. But there was one rule. Adrian had to keep his attention on three things at once: his breathing, his posture, and the space around him. At first it felt easy, but after only a few repetitions, Adrian noticed something unexpected. His mind kept wandering. One moment he focused on the strike. The next moment his thoughts drifted. "Am I doing this correctly? Are the other students watching? Is my form wrong?" Each time his thoughts left the moment, Takeda stopped him. "Again," he said calmly. This continued for nearly 20 minutes. Step, strike, pause, again. By the end of the exercise, Adrian felt strangely exhausted. Not physically, mentally. "I didn't realize how much my mind jumps around," he admitted. Takeda nodded. "That is the mind most people live with every day." Adrian frowned slightly. "But how does this help with pressure?" Takeda gestured toward the training floor. "Pressure does not create distraction," he said. "It reveals the distraction that is already there." Over the next few weeks, the training slowly intensified. Takeda introduced small elements of pressure during the exercises. Sometimes he would ask another student to move around Adrian while he practiced, forcing him to maintain awareness of his surroundings. Other times, Takeda would suddenly call out instructions, interrupting Adrian's movements and forcing him to adjust without losing focus. At first, Adrian struggled. Each time something unexpected happened, his attention scattered. His breathing became irregular. His movements lost their rhythm. And the same mental pattern returned. Thoughts racing ahead, fear imagining mistakes. Takeda would stop the exercise immediately. "Where was your mind?" he would ask. Adrian often didn't know how to answer. Eventually, he began noticing the pattern. His mind rarely stayed where it was supposed to be. Instead of focusing on the action itself, it jumped forward, imagining outcomes, predicting mistakes, anticipating judgment. And every time his mind left the present moment, his performance collapsed. One evening after training, Takeda explained something important. "The mind has two directions," he said. "It can remain here, in the present moment, or it can chase fear into the future. When pressure appears, weak minds run forward. They imagine failure before the action even begins." Adrian thought about every moment he had frozen in the past, during meetings, during presentations, during sparring. In each case, the same thing had happened. His mind had rushed ahead of the moment, fear had filled the empty space, and his focus had disappeared. Over time, Takeda began introducing sparring again. But this time, the goal was not winning. The goal was maintaining awareness. Before each round, Takeda repeated the same instruction. "Do not chase victory," he said. "Remain present." During the first few matches, Adrian struggled. The moment his opponent moved quickly, his thoughts began racing again. But this time, he noticed it happening. He focused on his breathing. He kept his attention on the movement in front of him. Slowly, something began to change. His reactions became smoother. His movements felt more natural, not because he had become faster, but because his mind was no longer scattering in every direction. Weeks passed. The training continued. Small improvements appeared. Adrian noticed that the same awareness he practiced in the dojo began appearing in other areas of his life. During meetings at work, when someone asked him a difficult question, he no longer felt the same mental panic. Instead of imagining failure, he focused on the moment, the question, the conversation, his breathing. And for the first time, his answers came naturally. The pressure hadn't disappeared, but it no longer controlled his attention. One evening, after several months of training, Takeda called Adrian to the center of the dojo. The other students gathered quietly around them. This time, Takeda said, "You will spar with me." Adrian felt the familiar tension rise in his chest. Takeda had far more experience. The outcome of the match was obvious, but Takeda raised a hand before the round began. "Remember," he said calmly, "this is not about winning. It is about your mind." The match began. Takeda moved quickly, testing Adrian's reactions. For a brief moment, Adrian felt his thoughts begin to scatter, but this time, he caught the feeling early. He slowed his breathing, focused on the movement in front of him, stayed present. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him. When the round ended, Adrian realized something surprising. His performance had been steady. Not perfect, but steady. Takeda nodded slightly. "You see now," he said, "pressure was never your enemy." Adrian looked at him. Then what was? Takeda smiled faintly, the mind that refused to remain where it belonged. For the first time, Adrian truly understood. Pressure had never been the problem. His wandering attention had been. And now, slowly, he was learning how to keep his mind exactly where it needed to be. Right here, in the moment where action actually happens. But here is the mistake most people make when they think about pressure. They believe pressure is the problem. They believe that if they could somehow remove the stress, the audience, the expectations, then their performance would improve. But that is not how the mind works. Pressure does not create the collapse. Pressure simply reveals the instability that already exists inside the mind. When pressure rises, an untrained mind begins chasing thoughts. What if I fail? What if this goes wrong? What will people think? In only a few seconds, attention leaves the present moment. And once the mind abandons the moment, performance disappears. The samurai understood something most people never learn. You cannot remove pressure from life. But you can train the mind to remain steady inside it. That training is called Zanshin. And once a person learns how to maintain this remaining mind, pressure stops being an enemy. After months of training, Adrian began to notice something important. The improvement he experienced did not come from motivation. It did not come from confidence, and it certainly did not come from eliminating pressure. The improvement came from training his mind to respond differently when pressure appeared. One evening after class, Adrian asked Takeda something he had been thinking about. "So Zanshin is just staying calm under pressure?" he asked. Takeda shook his head slowly. "Calmness is only the surface," he replied. "Zanshin is a discipline of awareness." He then explained that the samurai did not rely on willpower when chaos appeared. Willpower fades quickly when fear enters the mind. Instead, they trained a system that kept their attention steady even when the environment became unpredictable. Takeda described 3 habits that formed the foundation of Zanshin. The first was controlled attention. Most people allow their attention to move wherever emotion pulls it. When pressure rises, their focus shifts toward imagined outcomes instead of the present moment. They begin thinking about failure, judgment, or embarrassment. But the samurai trained their attention differently. They kept their focus on what was actually happening in front of them. The movement, the opponent, the breath, the environment. This simple discipline prevented the mind from drifting into panic. Adrian began applying this during stressful situations. Instead of thinking about how others might judge him, he kept his attention on the conversation itself. The question being asked, the task in front of him. Over time, the chaos inside his mind became quieter. The second habit Takeda described was emotional separation. Pressure creates strong emotional reactions: fear, excitement, frustration. Most people allow those emotions to control their decisions, but the samurai trained themselves to observe emotion without reacting to it immediately. They treated emotions like signals, not commands. If fear appeared, they noticed it, but they did not obey it. Adrian practiced this during sparring sessions. Instead of reacting to the sudden rush of tension, he acknowledged the feeling and continued focusing on the movement in front of him. The fear remained present, but it no longer dictated his actions. The third habit was continuous awareness. Takeda explained that Zanshin was not limited to a single action. Even after a strike was delivered or a decision was made, the mind remained alert. The samurai never allowed their awareness to collapse after success or failure. They stayed mentally present, ready for whatever came next. Adrian realized this was where many people lost control. After a mistake, they became distracted by frustration. After success, they relaxed too soon. In both cases, awareness disappeared. Zanshin required the opposite: steady awareness before, during, and after every action. Takeda looked at Adrian and summarized the lesson in a single sentence. A weak mind chases emotions, he said. A trained mind remains present. Adrian understood the difference now. Pressure had never been the real problem. The real problem had been the instability of his attention. And the moment he learned to control where his mind stayed, pressure stopped controlling him. The change in Adrian did not happen suddenly. There was no moment where fear disappeared completely, no day where pressure suddenly became easy. The transformation happened slowly, through repetition. At first, the differences were small. During sparring sessions, Adrian noticed that his mind no longer scattered as quickly when his opponent attacked. Instead of panicking, he stayed focused on the movement in front of him. His breathing remained steady. His attention stayed where it needed to be. Even when he made mistakes, something inside him remained calm. Before learning Zanshin, a mistake would have triggered frustration. His mind would begin replaying the error, and the rest of the match would unravel. Now something different happened. He noticed the mistake, and then returned his attention to the present moment. The next movement, the next opportunity. Nothing more. Outside the dojo, the same shift began appearing in his work. During meetings, Adrian no longer felt the same wave of panic when someone asked him a difficult question. In the past, his mind would rush ahead. What if I answer incorrectly? What will everyone think? Now his attention stayed on the conversation itself. He listened carefully. He thought clearly, and when he spoke, his words came naturally. One afternoon, his manager asked him to lead a presentation for an upcoming project. Months earlier, Adrian would have tried to avoid that responsibility. The idea of standing in front of the team would have filled his mind with anxiety for days. But this time, something inside him felt different. The pressure was still there, but it no longer felt overwhelming. On the day of the presentation, Adrian stood at the front of the room and felt the familiar tension appear in his chest. Dozens of eyes were watching him. For a moment, the old pattern tried to return. His thoughts began searching for possible mistakes, but he caught the reaction immediately. He focused on his breathing. He looked at the room calmly, and he returned his attention to the moment. The first sentence came easily, then the next. As the presentation continued, something surprising happened. The pressure that once felt overwhelming began to fade into the background. His mind remained steady, present, aware. When the presentation ended, the room remained quiet for a moment before his manager nodded approvingly. "Good work," she said. Walking back to his desk later that day, Adrian thought about how different the experience felt. The pressure had not disappeared. The situation had been exactly the same as before, but his mind had remained where it belonged. In the present moment, that was the real transformation. Zanshin had not removed pressure from his life. It had changed how his mind responded to it. The chaos that once controlled him had lost its power. Because now, Adrian understood something he had never realized before. Pressure does not break a person. It only exposes the stability of their mind. And once the mind learns to remain steady, pressure becomes just another moment to move through. Pressure reveals the mind. A scattered mind collapses. A trained mind remains. The samurai understood this long ago. Calm before chaos. Awareness before reaction. Presence before fear. When pressure rises, do not chase your thoughts. Return to the moment. Return to your breath. Return to the action in front of you. Train the remaining mind. Because strength under pressure is not talent, it is discipline. Before you go, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments. Where in your life do you need a stronger mind under pressure?